Welcome to this special event by Global Childhood Academy and the Housman Institute. My name is Samia Kazi, and I will be introducing all of you to our very special guests that we have today. So we have 2.2 billion children around the world. And according to the study of the World Bank, in low and middle income countries, only 20% of children are getting what they need from the adults who are around them. And when you think about the adults who are around them, we're not only talking about educators, teachers, we're also think about all the adults that children come in contact with. We're talking about social workers, health professionals, police officers, even policymakers, entrepreneurs, business people have an indirect effect on young children. And we know as education specialists, all stages of education are important, but especially early childhood education. We know that quality early childhood experiences for children can be the lever for society's healing. We know that if we want to design a peaceful society, a society that works together for the development of its youngest citizens, we need to focus on early childhood education, and we need to focus on working together as experts from around the world that are sharing our knowledge about what we need to do to upskill these adults who are working with children. This is why we built Global Childhood Academy. Global Childhood Academy is a platform that wants to empower both the learner, but as well as the training provider. We wanted to build a platform that provides one global hub for upskilling all of these adults that have a direct and an indirect effect on children, and really focusing on young children. So we wanted to build a platform that enables professionals to not only to gain the knowledge and the skills that they need for their own role, so helping teachers become better teachers, helping police officers becoming better at dealing with vulnerable and at-risk children, but we also wanted to build a platform that helps them understand their role within this interconnected system, helping them understand how important it is for them to work in partnership together. So we do this by serving, managing, and working with the leading vetted certified training providers, such as the Housman Institute. Now, GCA platform, we are still in the early stages of developing this global platform. We are slowly expanding and welcoming different training providers to come in and join our platform. Dr. Donna Housman, the founder of the Housman Institute, was one of the early partners. I'd like to call her the founding partners of Global Childhood Academy platform. So Dr. Donna Housman is a clinical psychologist with over 35 years of experience in child development and early childhood education. And she knows that prevention is better than repair. That's why she founded the Housman Institute, which is a lab school early childhood development center based on emotional foundations of learning and cognition. She has an evidence-based emotional, cognitive, and social early learning approach, which is called Begin to Excel, which fosters the building blocks of emotional intelligence starting from birth to promote self-regulation and empathy for lifelong learning, mental health, and well-being. As children develop within the context of relationships, the Excel approach trains educators to understand and manage their own emotionality before they can model for and guide children in theirs. So I am so excited to introduce to you, welcome Dr. Donna, and I'm going to hand it over to her to lead us through today's very special session. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Samia, for such a lovely introduction. And I am delighted and thrilled to be here today and to have the opportunity to discuss this very important and also timely topic with you all. As we continue into the third year of this pandemic, what has become increasingly clear is that we are now dealing with two pandemics, COVID and our mental health. And as we know, this past fall, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the Children's Hospital Association, the U.S. Surgeon General's report all declared a national emergency in children's mental health. And this was before the Omicron surge. And it's a trying time for everyone globally. But today we are going to be focused on helping and supporting the superheroes, all of you who have in the midst of weathering the continued changing landscape and trying to effectively deal with children's emotional, social, and cognitive early learning needs, as well as the needs and ongoing anxiety of their parents. You'll be learning how to truly put your own oxygen mask on in addressing your own needs before being able to help the children in your care and assist their parents. I am sure all of you can understand and relate to this educator's feeling. Teaching through the pandemic has left me feeling more than just burned out. I am gutted, empty, and wondering how I can continue to be the joyful, engaged teacher that my students need. No doubt you have your own notebooks filled with your own stories and emotions as we continue to find ourselves trying to stay afloat during this relentless storm. But for a moment, imagine you're reading a book and at the end of a long day of work, whether you're a teacher, a director, or administrator, you receive a call from your co-teacher or from a number of teachers calling out sick from work the next day. Already feeling stressed and anxious, short-staffed, what is this going to mean for your day? You try to go back to your book, but find yourself rereading the same sentence over and over again, unable to stop thinking about what tomorrow may hold. So what's happened here? Your heightened emotions of stress and anxiety have interrupted your ability to focus and concentrate on your book, let alone solve the problems at hand. Sound familiar? Early childhood educators are doing their best, as you all know, tapping all their creativity, love, passion, but are being faced with not only their own mental health needs, but also those of the children and parents that they work with every single day. Given the confluence of factors of ongoing stress, poor pay, lack of resources and support, we're now deep in the throes of a mental health crisis that's currently going beyond just heightened depression, stress, and anxiety. Rather, it's leading to burnout for many early childhood educators, resulting in the need of educators exiting the field in droves and the profession that they love. So what does this mean for our brains when dealing with heightened, prolonged stress? When feelings are not managed or regulated well, thinking can be impaired. And when the brain is dealing with unregulated emotion, it cannot learn. What we're talking about is the brain's ability to focus on the task at hand versus being hijacked by emotion. The brain likes and is calmed by predictability, yet the last couple of years has been anything but predictable. The virus is unpredictable. The people's response to the virus is unpredictable. When overwhelmed with stress and anxiety and not aware or managing these feelings very well, your brain becomes hijacked by dysregulated emotion, impairing your ability to think, problem solve, grasp new concepts, impacting executive function skills like focusing, comprehending, or memory, skills that are totally and fundamentally necessary for learning, and impacting your ability to be and do your best. We're hearing and reading about stress and burnout more than ever, but what is the difference? How do we really know when we're stressed versus burned out? Well, stress is our physical, mental, or emotional response to overwhelming circumstances as the body is trying to adjust to negative or positive changes, either temporary or prolonged. And there are different levels of stress. Mild could be speaking in groups. Moderate is like a breakup. And chronic is what we're all going through now. Signs of stress. It's one thing to think about stress, but sometimes we're totally unaware that we are stressed. But we can instead notice its manifestations, which are a trigger or sign in recognizing that something is going on. For example, feeling overwhelmed or unable to cope, experiencing decreased energy, insomnia, changes in libido, depression, headaches, rapid heartbeat, changes in appetite. Have you ever found yourself eating more and not tasting it? Or needing to go to the gym but having no energy left? Or lashing out at an important person at home or at work? Chronic stress affects your entire body, and if left unmanaged, can impact your mental health and well-being. Whereas burnout is a state of mental, physical, or emotional exhaustion that is often work-related. Burnout results in a feeling of loss of sense of self or accomplishment due to a feeling of having no control over your job. The situation is not going to change and nothing you can do about it. Signs of burnout involve feeling hopeless and empty, having no desire or motivation, and leaving you disengaged and detached from a role you used to love. So how does this connect to what we're seeing in children? Without question, we're all concerned about what this time has meant for our little ones, many of whom have only known a life in a pandemic. What impact has this had on our children? Well, it's become traumatic for many and is being experienced as trauma, and not just for children, but also for the teachers and parents who care for and teach them. Trauma used to be thought of as resulting from a singular or defined violent event, the death of a loved one or an abuse. And during this pandemic, the recent figures have been showing there are well over 6 million children globally that have lost a parent or grandparent. And this was really, these numbers were gleaned from before the Omicron surge. So the numbers are much higher now. And children are suffering immensely now, and they need our help. However, decades of research in child development have also made clear that trauma is not caused by isolated events alone. Child development research has shown in very young children, any major change or disruption can be traumatic, especially for kids who do not have the presence of an attentive, supportive adult responsive to their needs and able to help them regulate their emotions. And what we refer to is the presence of responsive relationships. And without the presence of a responsive relationship, a child's cortisol level, the stress hormone, will remain elevated, impacting healthy brain development and the body's ability to regulate stress, resulting in difficulties in executive function skills, learning, behavioral issues, mental health, and health issues long-term into adulthood. A recent revised policy statement issued by the American Academy of Pediatrics endorsed a paradigm shift toward the importance of responsive relationships, not only as a buffer for childhood adversity and trauma, but also to the promotion of resilience in the future. So what does it mean if caregivers, both teachers and parents, are dealing with their own feelings from stress, anxiety, and trauma, are seeing these changes in children, but are not equipped to handle them in children, let alone themselves? The bottom line is your emotions are matter. They're fundamental in everything that we do, in our behavior, in our learning. And the reality and truth is that stress and burnout, anxiety, and trauma take a toll, not just on teachers' mental health, but on their ability to teach and children's ability to learn. So why is this? I often get that question. Well, what does my stress have to do with children paying attention or their ability to learn? Well, because children develop in the context of relationships with key adults. Children are emotional detectives. They're observing and absorbing the actions, reactions, and responses of key adults in their world. And if you're trying to figure out where you fit, what's most important is learning how to cope with your emotions and handle different levels of stress, not just for your own sense of well-being, but as educators, you play an important role in helping children how to cope with their own emotions. But before you can help children, you must first learn how to cope with your own emotions and the emotions that accompany all the experiences that you're having. The oxygen mask rule. Everyone has the emotional fingerprints, both good and bad, of the adults and experiences that they were surrounded by in the earliest years, influencing and impacting our learned behaviors. When experiencing and dealing with intense emotions, what we've observed or learned through our own histories may have been people either shutting down, walking away, exploding, and none of these ways are effective or helpful in resolving the problem. As mentioned earlier, today we're going to learn ways to how effectively to manage our intense emotions so as to be able to constructively and successfully deal with these challenging situations, both personally and professionally. Second to parents, and in some instances, in place of a parent, educators are key socializers for children. Before we can help children with their stress and become emotionally competent, we need to lay the foundation for emotional intelligence in ourselves first. To effectively teach what needs to be mastered, we need to first master these skills ourselves. So let's explore for a moment what this really means. Here in front of you, you have 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence for us to take a look at. On the left side, you see 2 quadrants that really comprise emotion knowledge. And emotion knowledge is comprised of recognition and identification that you see in the first quadrant. The ability to be able to recognize, identify, and label one's own emotions and those of others. In the lower quadrant is understanding. Understanding the differences between and among emotions, being aware of emotions and able to discern emotions accurately. Whereas on the right side are 2 quadrants that comprise emotion regulation. The third quadrant is expression, able to express emotions constructively, for example, using words versus action. And on the fourth quadrant is regulation. How do we manage and cope effectively with heightened emotions, both positive and negative? It's critical that adults understand these 4 quadrants for themselves. We often focus only on the children's emotional intelligence, but it's important to keep in mind that adults must do these things first before they can model and guide for children. So let's take a look at some examples. The first quadrant, as I had mentioned, is recognition and identification. Here, as an adult, you're able to verbalize and label your feelings. You're also able to observe and label feelings of others. For example, when you notice someone's facial expression and or body language and can discern that they are feeling a certain way from these cues, you are recognizing and identifying how they're feeling. The second quadrant, understanding. Here, you're able to accurately tune into and comprehend or discern your own emotions and those of others. Accurately is key. Sometimes we can confuse one emotion for another. And sometimes, as an example, sadness can be confused with anger, especially among adults. There's an important distinction. Anger is getting something you don't want. Sadness is not getting something you do want. As an example, sometimes anger arises in the midst of an argument because you're being presented with information that you do not agree with, getting something you don't want. Whereas sadness may be experienced with not being able to see your family for the holidays, not getting something you do want. It's important to be able to discern between these emotions and be able to understand the context within which they arise. It's also important for you to know that all feelings are both normal and natural. It's what we do with them that matters most. Emotion regulation, expression. Although this may seem as straightforward as a smile when happy or crying when sad, being able to express emotions appropriately and constructively, especially when they begin to escalate, can be challenging for us all. Think about the last time you felt really angry. Was your immediate reaction to yell, scream, or shut down? Or were you able to pause and calmly verbalize how you were feeling? Being able to experience and express our emotions in constructive ways can help us become effectively able to manage and regulate those emotions and regulation. It's important to be aware of strategies to help us regulate intense feelings so that we're better able to access thinking and generate our thoughts, meaning our thoughts aren't being hijacked by intense feelings. Taking deep breaths is the first step in helping adults and children calm bodies and minds, but it doesn't end there. So how do we do deep breathing, and how does deep breathing work? Well, deep breathing helps regulate our nervous system and lower our heart rate, which leads your brain to release endorphins, a chemical that has a natural calming effect, so we can think more clearly and better be able to manage emotions. Now, deep breathing may seem intuitive, but accurately engaging in deep breathing requires some instruction. So many people pay lip service to it without actually doing it right. So for a moment, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about deep breathing. Deep breathing involves slowly inhaling through the nose, the count of 4, pausing, and then slowly exhaling through the mouth with a count of 8 with relaxed shoulders. Slowly is key. So try taking some deep breaths now and pay attention to how your body and mind are feeling. Feeling a bit more calm? However, when our brains are cluttered with stress and associated feelings, we are not able to think clearly, problem solve, communicate, or do our jobs effectively. When we are not managing our stress and emotions, they can take over every aspect of our daily life. Responding to the unique developmental needs and big emotions of young children does require the skills of emotional intelligence, how we deal with and manage our own emotions and those of others. So let's remember that children learn from responsive relationships with key adults. Your own emotionality as a teacher is critical in fostering children's learning as well. Emotion is the core connector in all relationships. A supportive and meaningful relationship with your students, one that is responsive and sensitive to their emotions and needs, helps the child feel understood, more aware and accepting of their own emotions and those of others, and more available to learning. This process of helping a child become self-aware and able to manage and deal with emotions starts with you. By understanding your own emotionality, you become more self-aware and then better able to model, respond, guide, and instruct the child in your care. Because at the core of self-awareness is emotional awareness. Emotional awareness ties together everything we have learned in the 4 quadrants. There are 6 levels of emotional awareness. The first level is awareness, being aware of our own emotions by first knowing that a feeling is present. You may notice a physiological change, such as increased heartbeat. The second level is acknowledgement, acknowledging that you're experiencing a feeling, even if you don't know what that feeling is, before it bubbles over. Third is identification, being able to recognize and identify your feelings by name, which is also one of the 4 quadrants in emotional intelligence. The fourth level is that of acceptance, accepting our feelings at the present moment. When you accept it, you're letting yourself know it's okay. You're giving yourself permission to be having the feeling. The fifth is reflection, reflecting on the cause of an emotion to guide us towards finding an appropriate solution. Reflection is the capstone experience encapsulating all previous steps and maximizing them. Lastly is forecasting, predicting when certain emotions will arise and choosing the best course of action in the future. Saying, I know I'm going to regret this, and then not choosing this action is an example of forecasting. the ability to learn from our mistakes, think, process, and not make the same mistake twice. Doesn't mean you won't make another mistake, but you won't make the same one. This ability extends to others as well. When we are more aware of our own feelings and can forecast, we are then more likely to also forecast how someone else might be feeling, leading to a more sensitive, considerate, and empathetic person, especially for educators. This is the core of empathy. So, how are these 6 levels related to your long-term well-being and professional career? Let me use an example to show you. Awareness. Imagine you're at a parent-teacher conference and you're waiting for the parents. You might be nervous and biting your fingernails. At first, you may not be aware of your behavior or the feeling causing it. You might realize a feeling is present because your heart is beginning to beat rapidly. And through this process, you're tuning in and becoming aware that a feeling is present. Acknowledgement. After you notice you're biting your nails and your heart is racing, you can acknowledge the feeling even if you don't know yet what it is. Our feelings can point us to causes and solutions, but if we don't acknowledge even our negative feelings, we won't be able to focus our attention on the problem that needs to be solved. Identification. Thinking about your conference, you can now identify that you're feeling nervous. Labeling that feeling can make it more manageable because it allows for you to take the appropriate corrective action and take next steps towards solving the problem. When thoughts are clear, we feel much more in control. Acceptance. All feelings are okay. It's what we do with them that matters most. Give yourself permission to accept your nervous feelings. You may think that as a teacher, you should be calm and professional instead of nervous. It is easier to make positive changes in our lives when we have fully accepted our feelings in the present moment, which takes less energy than denying feelings and prevents them from recurring. When we have fully accepted our feelings, we can shift our energy to productive thoughts and actions and deal with them. Reflection. When you're back home after the conference, you may be thinking about how you can prepare yourself to calm down for the next conference by taking some deep breaths. Remember those? They really work. And the sooner we can accurately identify and reflect on a feeling, the sooner we can take action in our best interest for the next time. I think it's important also to remember that deep breathing is the first step in this process. It's not the only step, nor is it the last. Forecasting. You now know that you will likely feel nervous again for your next parent-teacher conference. So you may come up with strategies to regulate these feelings. Again, like deep breathing is one tool in our toolkit. And remember, we learn from our mistakes and from our experiences. When we predict our feelings, we can make decisions in advance that lead to our long-term goal and happiness. The more aware we are of our feelings, the better chance we have of predicting how we will feel in the future and put strategies in place to effectively deal with them. So what are some strategies? Once we work to become more emotionally aware, then what? We can explore and adopt some helpful stress management techniques, such as self-reflection, which is a form of self-examination of one's thoughts, feelings, and actions. Questions like, what made me feel this way? What could I have done differently? How could I have made the situation more positive? How can I do better next time? When we practice self-reflection, we're able to think clearly in order to solve problems, focus, address challenges, and have the skills to make a plan to do things more effectively next time. Self-reflection is the key to self-awareness and means putting it all together. Engaging in reflective journaling, which is a written account of yourself with no right or wrong answers. It's sort of like a reflective diary, which promotes practicing self-awareness and self-reflection regularly. Journaling is a real form of talking out loud and it's if talking to someone else, which allows you to think more clearly when you have it on paper and helps you identify and deal with the tangible items behind the emotion. Practicing physiological regulation techniques, for example, taking deep breaths, as we've mentioned, practicing yoga or mindful activities to focus on the present moment, connecting with your breath or focusing on putting yourself first is a great way to practice self-care. When you as educators have the skills in practicing self-awareness, self-reflection, and stress management, you can model, guide, and teach them to the children in your care. You're also a calmer and happier person. So why is this important? Well, because children learn by imitation, observation, and how we guide, model, and respond to them and to others. When teachers practice and are trained in these skills, not only does it improve and enhance one's own mental health and well-being, both personally and professionally, but also can help better support children in developing the same skills necessary for lifelong learning and success. The ability to identify, understand, constructively express, and regulate their emotions and those of others. Both self-regulation and emotional competence are at the heart of children's success, both in learning and in life. But it all starts with you as the key socializer. Training and support is the key. Everything we've seen and talked about here focuses on the importance of dealing with one's own emotions and those of others within the context of responsive relationships. At Housman Institute, we know this through our research, experience, and practice. And that's why we start by training teachers to deal not just with the emotions of children, but first learning how to manage their own emotions. And then they share their knowledge and techniques with the parents and the community. This is the cultural change we know is so needed. At Housman Institute, we've always understood this, and now it's front and center in most conversations about educating children today. Our research and practice of over 30 years that shows that professional development programs that focus on educator well-being also positively impacts student well-being. Educators are always at the center of all of our work. And this is why we designed standalone programs to address and deal with educators and school leaders' emotional well-being, not only for their own personal and professional growth, but also for the students in their care. As we discussed earlier, children develop within the context of relationships, picking up the emotional cues, responses, and reactions of the key adults in their world. Young children have unique developmental needs and big emotions, requiring tremendous effort, knowledge, and skill from the key adults, the skills of emotional intelligence. In light of this, at the heart of our Begin to Excel training are educators. Begin to Excel not only fosters these emotional intelligence skills in children, but also trains educators to recognize, understand, and regulate and deal with their own stress, anxiety, and trauma, as well as the children in their care. We also know that educators, along with ongoing training, need continuous support and feedback. We've learned that without these supports in place, training is ineffective. So we've woven those support systems throughout our year-long training programs in the form of mentoring, coaching, reflective practice, and collaborative peer engagement. It is now my pleasure and delight to introduce Emily Stone. Emily is a Housman Institute coach and trainer and a former teacher and mentor. For the next several minutes, we're going to be having a conversation about the impact and power of emotional intelligence for educators through the lens of an educator and mentor, and hear about Emily's experiences before and after training in learning how to effectively deal with her own emotions and those of others. And we want to invite you all into the conversation. So please post your questions in the chat box. Emily? It's a thrill to have you here.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you several questions. So the first question is, can you share a bit about your journey as a teacher before you had any understanding of the importance that your own emotions play? And how did you handle heated situations, both in and out of the classroom?
Sure. I think before my training, we all have learned behaviors that we gain and, practice from our parents and our experiences and our environments from when we were children. For me, that meant bottling up emotions rather than addressing them head on in the heat of the moment. And what would that would look like in the classroom was one small thing would happen and I would, lose patience, feel like I was exploding and that I was in the midst of disaster, because this was really resulting in unmanaged stress for me. So stress as an educator, as we all know, is very common and very real. And so if there was a heated or heightened emotional situation in the classroom with the children there, I was not my best. I would lose my patience. And children who, as you pointed out, are emotional detectives would pick up on that immediately. This might look like my tone of voice not matching my facial expression or my body language being tense. And they're able to pick up on that just as much as they're able to pick up on my words. So it was hard to get children in my class in control just due to the fact that I was not in control and I wasn't addressing my emotions. Johnny, you're muted.
Sorry. You mentioned something that was very important. You talked about that they would notice both your body language, but and your behavior, but also listening to your words. And what is really important to take into account is that when we're communicating to others, and particularly with children, is that we want to make what we are saying match and be consistent with our behavior. Because otherwise, what happens is the child is left feeling very confused. They're seeing something, they're hearing something different, or they're hearing something and they're seeing something different. And we really need to make sure that there is a consistency between both.
Absolutely.
Okay, so next question. What was your experience like going through the training and how to deal with and manage your own emotions and those of others? And how did you see the impact develop as you began to hone in and practice your skills?
I'll start with the training. I think the topics and the concepts and techniques really helped connect the pieces for me and heightened my understanding of my own emotions and the impact that they have on children, on families, my coworkers, other mentors. And showed me new ways to apply to my teaching practices for addressing my own emotions. And that really translated whether I was in work, whether I was at home with my family and friends and personal relationships, that it allowed me to really, acknowledge what wasn't working, as hard as that sometimes is, and find new strategies for what could work better. I think that was the really pivotal moment for me about my training, was really, really self-reflecting. And gaining a self-awareness of okay, this is what I tend to do, and this isn't benefiting me. So what can I do instead to better target those areas that aren't benefiting me and to actually improve? So it really helped with identifying areas of improvement and actually finding strategies to improve and to meet that goals. It was also a really great open forum for communication amongst educators. It's really, really tangible and helpful to be able to share your experiences with others, hear their experiences and also their ideas, because other teachers might have strategies that you haven't thought of that could really, really work for you in that situation. And so it's also just, it's great to connect with other educators who really understand what you're going through and the stress and where children are at right now. Which, I think spoke volumes.
Right. And again, self-reflection is really at the heart of everything that we do, because it allows us to become more aware of what is going on. And when we become aware of what we're feeling or thinking or how we're behaving, then that gives us enough information and important information for us to make decisions going forward. And it also allows us to have information before the emotions hijack us and it bubbles over, and then we're left in a position or a situation that we don't want to be in. So self-reflection, again, is very, very important.
Absolutely. We actually got a Q&A that somewhat relates to this, Donna. So I did just want to call it out that someone shared that they've had a similar experience where they were having a particularly, sad or blue day. And the teacher shared briefly how they were feeling, and we're asking, is it okay to explicitly share with children in our care what we're feeling? And I would love for you to start, and I can.
Sure. Not is it only okay, it is necessary for us to be able to share. Now, I'm not suggesting by any means that if you're really angry, that you express anger in ways that we may have been taught as a kid or observed, but letting a child know firmly and clearly that you are angry and using a different voice other than your typical voice so they can hear that you really are clear and mean business and why you are angry in terms of what is making you angry is the beginning process in helping the child begin to recognize that it's okay, first of all, to be angry. It's okay to talk about being angry, and that there is a reason that I am angry. And now we can solve the problem to try to resolve what has caused this to happen to begin with. And there is a solution to becoming angry. So I think it is very important, yes, to be very direct with what you're feeling. And also because over the years, and this is why oftentimes I try to be very clear in making a distinction between anger and sadness, is that oftentimes people have either been told or have felt that it's not okay to let someone know that you're angry. And so instead of using the word anger, they replace it with the word that's making me sad. And that's not really how they're feeling. And that becomes very confusing to the child in terms of being able to separate and distinguish between those two very different emotions.
Absolutely. It also really helps children, on so many levels. It's helping children understand that adults also have these feelings. It helps children understand that even those quote unquote negative feelings, which we like to call prickly feelings because they're all okay, are happening to everyone, that everyone experiences them. And it's okay to feel, sad or blue or angry or frustrated. But as Donna, you like to say, it's really what we do with those feelings that matters. And so as a teacher, by kind of ignoring those things and trying to just move on with the day, you're contradicting that message and you're making it seem like those prickly feelings don't matter and that they aren't valid and that they don't have causes. But you're also showing children that they're unable to move on, when the point is that, yes, you might feel these prickly emotions, but they won't last you forever. And so rather than pushing it down and, as we said previously, giving out those confusing body signals, tone of voice, etc., saying, I'm having a sad day and this is why. Has anyone else ever had a day where they're just feeling sad or blue? And all of a sudden, you're turning that into a real learning opportunity for everyone. And you're also modeling and guiding for children how to connect cause and effect, how to understand that, okay, my teacher's feeling sad and they're telling me using words. They're not, shutting down and crying, which is also okay. But showing a model of that regulated emotion.
And I just want to piggyback off of what you're saying, in that it is important to be able to, as we're both saying, identify accurately what the feeling is, but also giving a reason, because children end up feeling that it has something to do with them without the reason, that they say, did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me? And there may be at times, yes, it is having to do with a child, but there may be times when it doesn't. And it's important to be able to communicate that as well.
Absolutely.
And giving permission to yourself to be able to share those emotions is also giving permission, Emily, as you had mentioned, to the child, that it is very important for them to be able to share their emotions, because again, All emotions are fine, both the prickly and the cozy ones. It's what we do with them that really is important and matters. And this is what we want to help you and also be able to help the children learn how to deal with, is what to do with these emotions so that they can continue to move forward and achieve their goals and aims.
Yeah. And also, responsive relationships, as you pointed out, are so critical. So if kids aren't feeling safe to express their emotions, it's not really that full responsive relationship. And so when you're trying to nurture that support, actually talking through your emotions makes them valid and helps children realize, oh, I'm safe to do the same. I can do that also. And nothing's going to happen. It's a good thing. And I want to go back briefly to what you said, Donna, about children internalizing it as something that they may have done wrong, even if it's not. I also do want to point out that even if the cause of the sadness or frustration or whatever it may be is linked to the child, it's not about, punishment ever. It's not about making them feel guilty, but about saying, I'm feeling really frustrated right now because you aren't listening to my words. So what can we do so that I feel less frustrated and move on? So it's taking on that problem-solving lens rather than accusatory, all through that positive framework.
Absolutely. And which is very, very important. Okay. Can you talk about how your training impacted you personally and professionally? And what are some examples before and after your training in terms of how you dealt with heated moments? And what was the impact of your training on your relationships, both personal and professional, with coworkers and families?
I'll start with personally. When I first started my training, I never could have imagined that it would have had such a personal impact on me. But I saw an immense change in my ability to communicate generally, not just about my emotions, but obviously about my emotions as well, which helped to improve my relationships with my partner, my friends, my families, because again, I'm reflecting, I'm taking the time to identify what isn't working. And some of those things really have to do with myself and what can change. And so that really came across to them. But I was also able to find the techniques to really manage my own stress and regulate my own emotions that I felt I had been clearly ignoring and bottling, hoping that that was just the quick and easy fix. And that certainly translated professionally as well. As I said previously, that, as a teacher, my communication with my coworkers or my co-teachers really improved. And the same went for family members and children, because when you really are taking the time and space to self-reflect and develop that emotional awareness, you automatically begin to develop more empathy, more perspective taking. And so I would always try to seek out and understand where another person's coming from, what they might be feeling, and have that be the basis of our communication, which really speaks volumes. And from a mentorship and managerial standpoint, the same thing. You're really then able to listen to what other people are telling you and take that space to reflect, because it's oftentimes it's so much more important to listen than it is to speak. And even that is a key piece in being self-aware and in self-reflecting.
Absolutely. Now, there's a couple of more questions that we have, but I want to be, respectful of the time. So, Samia, I'm going to ask you if we should really kind of wrap it up now, or if we have a few more minutes to go on.
I think you can, there's lots of questions. So maybe if you want to take a few more minutes to answer some questions, and then we'll close out. Thank you, Donna.
Okay. All right.
I can read some out, Donna.
Okay, great.
Into the chat box. Okay. Someone asked, we learned that showing anger is some sort of, harming the child, that it's not the fault of the child, and it's that the adult is not handling their anger well. Could you please comment on that? Someone also asked if shouting is okay. I do want to address too, as we said previously, there's a way of expressing anger and those more prickly emotions in a calm way. Actually, yelling or raising your voice kind of does the opposite, because then children are being escalated by your own body. If you're talking about your anger or your frustration in a calm way, you're bringing them down to your level, and they're able to really hear and understand you and want to work with you, as opposed to escalating themselves or shutting down or, becoming fearful of making another adult angry or upset. And that's not what we want to do, because again, everyone, including adults, at some point, multiple points, makes other people angry or upset, and that's not always the intentions. But it's about that safe environment to not feel fearful of what could happen, but to have that support that someone will be there to walk you through those things.
I'd like to add that anger has been conditioned to be a learned negative response. And that has been basically based on what we have seen in terms of how people have expressed anger. And it's been either shouting, exploding, shutting down, walking away. But whichever way, in terms of those 4 examples I just gave, none of those are helpful. None of those feel good for the person who's having it or the person who's witnessing it. So when we talk about expressing anger, it's expressing anger, as Emily is pointing out, in a very clear, calm, but focused way, and being able to, again, use the words that you're angry with the reason that is making you angry, and how can we solve this problem? So it's not just letting go of anger and leaving it just, throughout the atmosphere and just falling on everybody, but it is identifying it and being able to come to an appropriate and helpful solution.
Absolutely. Another one now is, someone said, I believe most crucial on a personal level are reflection and reflexivity. Would you agree? And where do institutions and families' roles in this towards children benefits?
Reflection is the key. Awareness is the key to learning about oneself and about others. And without reflection, there's no ability to really be able to figure out what is going on, whatever that may be. Questions is at the heart of learning. It's not the answers, it's the questions that really promote learning. And so reflection is a way to internally ask questions about oneself or about what you're observing or seeing. So that is critical in really coming to terms with moving forward and being helpful in terms of developing confidence, a sense of inner control, and a sense of competence.
Definitely. I think we have time probably for one more. So someone also asked, I think adults and the surroundings in general need to literally embrace how children feel. How do you think media and cartoons specifically could participate effectively in emotional growth of children?
I think media can be very effective in helping children as long as they are understanding the message that needs to be given and helping children be able to manage and understand emotions in healthy and helpful ways. I am writing, several children's books about this. So literacy too can be very helpful with children. Literacy, TV shows, again, that really understand the messaging that is necessary in helping children to be able to label their emotions, to be able to recognize what they're feeling and others in terms of developing empathy and being able to express them in constructive ways, not destructive ways, and managing the intensity of their emotions so they can continue to learn, have fun, and again, enjoy the experiences between them and their friend across their play space.
I agree. I do think it's also important for us as adults to kind of vet out what the exposure to media and cartoons is, because we do want to make sure that when children are looking at, animated or cartoon characters, even in drawings and books, for example, that their facial expressions are truly reflective of what the emotion looks like. Because if you're using then that storybook or that cartoon to have a conversation of, oh, what is this character feeling? Have you ever felt that way? They're building that ability to identify and recognize emotions, to label them, to really understand what they look like. And so it's important that it's an accurate representation of what that emotion looks like so that they can continue to label them correctly. And also, as Donna, you're saying, to really use that exposure in ways that are beneficial to exploring social problems or the cause and effect of different emotions on different characters, and really turn that again into that learning opportunity to discuss and have children connect their own experiences to it.
Correct. Absolutely. I don't know, Emily, if you want to say anything about the courses.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we're out of time for questions, but thank you all so much. You submitted incredible questions. Housman Institute has so many programs, but we've been working with GCA to select some of our key programs that we believe will be relevant to you all on a global level. So we encourage you to enroll and share the links in the chat box with others. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to GCA or us at Housman Institute. And I believe the links have been sent in the chat box, but if not, I think they can be sent again as well.
And I want to thank you all for attending, and I've very much enjoyed speaking with you and trying to respond to your questions. Thank you very much, Samia, for having us.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you.